Behind the Whaling Museum at the end of Center Street, affixed to a building, is a well-aged and pretty much forgotten plaque that was placed there in 1924. It reads, "Near this spot in 1767, the first ship built in New Bedford was launched, the Dartmouth. Francis Roach, owner. She was one of the vessels boarded by the Boston Tea Party in 1773, placed by the New Bedford Chapter 1924. However, if we go up the hill to the Whaling Museum, also known as the Old Dartmouth Historical Society, we now can add to our understanding of the historic ship Dartmouth. To celebrate the 350th anniversary of incorporation of Old Dartmouth, the Whaling Museum commissioned a model of this first fully rigged ship to be launched in the new settlement.
Well, this vessel was built for Joseph Roach. Joseph Roach came to the budding village of Bedford, as it was called then, from Nantucket because he realized that a land-based port would be more reasonable for his whaling operations. Nantucket has a shallow harbor, and it is, after all, an island and difficult to get to. So he came and established himself in this developing village, bought up a large part of the waterfront, and prospered, to be sure, in the whaling industry. This was the first full-rigged ship that was built in this fledgling village of Bedford, and we're very pleased that we are able to represent her in all her glory, because it was the first vessel built in all of the Old Dartmouth area, which is celebrating its 350th anniversary. This vessel was built in 1767. She was built by Joseph Roach and Sons, a company, to carry his product, whale oil, to England. England was the major market for whale oil during that period of time. So he built this as a transport vessel, not as a whaling vessel, to carry oil to England. Which she did. And of course, she got over to England, she unloaded her whale oil, and she then would bring back goods from England for this new colony, the fledgling colony here on this coast. And it happened that she brought back tea from England and then got to Boston Harbor, where she was going to unload her tea. And I think the story is well known of the Boston Tea Party, because this was one of the three ships that was involved in the dumping of tea into Boston Harbor in protest against the taxes that England was putting on tea. She continued her history, continued to take another load of whale oil to London, and was lost the next trip, so that she was lost in 1774, just after the Boston Tea Party. And so she serves us both as the first icon of the growing whaling industry in this city, and also the effort of the Patriots to free themselves from England's domain.
This model was commissioned in honor of John Garfield, and we're very lucky to have it. It's an exquisite piece that complements our collection and fills a gap that was missing. Many people don't realize, because of the name of the museum, that we're the New Bedford Whaling Museum, but we're also the Dartmouth Historical Society. So that's a very important part of our story, our narrative that we try to tell in the museum, and this model is a key element to our maritime heritage in Dartmouth.
I'm a little stunned by it. Usually they give you a little piece of plaque or something that says thanks a bunch and get out the door. And this is really a spectacular contribution to the museum. There was a gap in the model collection of the museum, and they were looking for something to this particular boat, because of the historical connection with having been built right here in Old Dartmouth, and the fact that I was from Dartmouth or living in Dartmouth, and so they just decided that this would be an appropriate addition to the collection, and since I was getting off as chairman, they decided that that would be very nice to do, and I'm stunned.
Quite a bit of extensive research went into this before anything was started in the way of a model. And it was basically instigated by Leon Poindexter, who was a maritime historian and shipbuilder and preservationist. And he was asked to do a replica for the Boston Tea Party Museum. Leon was able to find research on Dartmouth. He uncovered a newspaper article in the Boston Evening Post in March of 1767, just around when she was finished, that indicated a vessel was being auctioned, part ownership. And he felt that the dimensions fit the characteristics of what we thought Dartmouth was going to be. Did more research on that. It fortunately listed some dimensions, and then through further discovery in England at the National Maritime Museum, he found a appropriate naval architectural plan of a merchant ship that fit these same characteristics. This is very much a bluff bow, cargo-oriented vessel, the type being built in England and in the colonies. So everything fit properly. So he was able to back up that information into his plan, and he then built this reconstruction drawing, which is what our artist, Richard Glanville, used to build the model. The deck detail was critical for knowing what a merchant ship of this era must have had, hatch covers and hatches, a companionway below, the fact that it was tiller operated versus a wheel. These were all traditional things, but we had to have some evidence of that, and that's where these wreck sites filled that gap. Another important area was this whole anchor windlass forward. There was definite research done on that, what was used at the time, and also being built in this colonial era. Things like the color scheme were also critical. Because Roach was a Quaker, the color scheme was going to be very muted and very simple, nothing garish like the use of blues or reds. And that's why it's very low-key. The yellow ochre was a traditional form for merchantmen and naval ships. The color on the bottom is a tallow cream, which basically is depicting the anti-fouling paint scheme and formula that they had at the time. This was pre-copper sheathing. The flag is the Queen Anne flag, which represented the colonial merchant vessels of the era. Another aspect on the model with research was the rig. The rig was pretty standardized at the time. However, merchant ships tended to do a reduced format of standing rigging and mast heights versus a naval vessel. So all this had to be calculated into Leon's sail plan. The model was built by Richard Glanville. He's a marine model artist who lives up in Maine. He's had a lot of work with colonial vessels before. He was also very helpful with Leon Poindexter, analyzing the research that he had come up with and how he might interpret it in the way of a scale model. So this was a fairly straightforward job. The model selection in terms of construction is a solid laminated waterline lift model. The decks are applied, they're all laid individually. The hatch covers and gratings are all individually made. It's what we call an A-class model, which means that it's all done from scratch. There are no commercial parts or pieces used on this piece. The overall construction took about 7 months, and generally they start with the hull and prepare that, and then all the deck fittings and furniture are made separately. The masting is also developed off the model, and then when the sequencing is right, that all is applied to the model, and then the rigging, standing rigging, goes on first, and then the running lines. But start to finish, it was about 7 months of work.
Well, this is a perfect serendipitous model to coincide with the Dartmouth 350, and certainly at the moment it's in the ship model exhibit, the Art of the Ship model, but it will complement a historical section of the exhibit called Conduct Us to Our Hope in the spring, and this model will become part of this collaboration to celebrate the Dartmouth 350.